everyone. I am Julia Hernandez. I am so excited to be here. Thank you for the lovely introduction, Mike. I wanted to first give you a little context for this wonderful presentation that you're going to see in putting together and imagining what kind of events we could have to share some of the wonderful collections we have here for telling stories about Latina communities in the US and communities with roots in Latin America throughout the country that we find here in the Beinecke. I was excited to work with students to crowdsource information about the things they were excited about in the collection, things they were working with in their research, people who were coming in and using the collections and seeing it through their eyes. And I am very delighted that we have two working groups here, part of the Humanities Center, the Millen Humanities Center working groups, community of groups who can pitch a theme and a topic and get support to create a community of practice and scholarship around a theme in the humanities. And we have two groups here, the Latine Arts and Activism Working Group and the Nahuatl Working Group, who will tell you a little bit about their work. But we are here with the chance to see the collection through their eyes and what has been exciting to them. I think we mentioned that we have, there we go. Oh, we have Latina Heritage Month programming throughout the next few weeks, starting September 15th and ending a little beyond October 15th with a final Mondays at Beinecke. We'll also be collaborating with La Casa Cultural. So everyone is invited to these public events, with the capstone event being our open house that these students you'll see today will also be contributing to. The wonderful objects they will be describing will all be on view for you to come and see in person and really experience firsthand. It's a bilingual event open to families, friends, neighbors, everyone in our community to come in and experience what we have to offer and explore more the communities and stories that are present here. That's why we have Estamos Presentes as the name for our honoring of Latina heritage at Beinecke. And if you aren't familiar, I just thought I'd give you a little, if you were wondering about Latina Heritage Month, this is a nationally recognized month that was initially signed into law under the Johnson administration to recognize the contribution of what then the term would have been Hispanic American people to our country, and it became codified as a full month under the Reagan administration. But this is something that was signed into law and is now a part of our national recognition of different heritage groups. So that's the context for us bringing together this moment to celebrate and reflect on the contributions and voices in our collections here at the Beinecke that come from these communities. So I will move into letting our students speak for themselves. So please, we will give a hand to our first presenters from the Latina Arts and Activism Working Group, and I'll hand it over to y'all. So please take the floor.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Julia, and thank you, everyone that's here. I just wanted to quickly introduce the Latina Arts and Activism Working Group. Alongside my colleagues here who are present, we have been organizing this working group since last semester, and we focus on the comparative analysis of Latinx, Latin American, and Caribbean cultural histories in the United States and beyond. And each semester we host and participate in events that convene scholars, activists, and artists to discuss ongoing research, share creative projects, and engage pressing cultural and political questions. Our main goal is to seed collaborations that contribute to Latinx scholarship at Yale and beyond Yale. And I'll pass it on to Soy to present to us on very interesting collections here at Beinecke.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Luis. And hello, everyone. So my name is Zoe Guiney, and I'm a second-year grad student in the Spanish and Portuguese and also the Film and Media Study departments here at Yale. And today I'm going to be talking about some materials we have in the Beinecke Library related to the Nuyorican Poets Cafe. So the Nuyorican Poets Cafe is a cultural and artistic center. It was founded in 1973 in New York City as part of the Nuyorican movement. So if you're not familiar, Nuyorican this word is a combination of the words New York and Puerto Rican. It's part of a movement that really began in the late 60s, early 1970s, artistic and intellectual movement focused on the experiences of the Puerto Rican diaspora. And the Nuyorican Poets Cafe began in the Lower East Side apartment of writer Miguel Algarin. It was a collaborative effort amongst, in their own words, playwrights, poets, and musicians of color whose work was not accepted by the mainstream academic, entertainment, or publishing industries. So the cafe, which we can see in this center picture right here, continues to this day. It's an active hub of artistic production and performance, and it's a space dedicated to multidisciplinary artistic practices. And once again, in their own words, the cafe champions the use of poetry, jazz, theater, hip hop, and spoken word as means of social empowerment for minority and underprivileged artists. So could we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. I was thinking that to give us a better sense of the art coming out of this scene, especially in its early days, that I wanted to show you a clip of Pedro Pietri. He was another founder of the Nuyorican Poets Cafe, and he was actually depicted in the mural on the facade of the building. And in this clip, thank you. In this clip, he's performing, and it's actually an excerpt of his work, Puerto Rican Obituary. It's really an iconic piece of the movement. I think you can really get a sense from this short video, the close connection between the Nuyorican poets and the political and community organizing that was happening at the time. So we'll just see a small part.
They were always on time. They were never late. They never spoke back when they were insulted. They worked. They never went on strike about permission. They never took days off that were not on the calendar. They worked 10 days a week and were only paid for 5.
Thank you. All right, can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So that was just to give us an idea, but actually some of the materials that we have here at the Beinecke are actually from a later era of the Nuyorican Poets Cafe. And specifically, we have materials surrounding the 1992 play Life During Wartime. It was produced and performed within the cafe itself. And it was partly inspired by the 1983 case of Michael Stewart. Stewart was a graffiti artist who died after police officers arrested him for writing graffiti on the subway and then brutally beat him. And the play imagines and represents the events surrounding the murder through the perspectives of family members, lawyers, witnesses, the police, and the media. And at the time of its production, again in 1992, the play was praised for its handling of the urgent issues of police brutality and race. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So it was written by the novelist, playwright, and scholar Wesley Brown. Wesley Brown was a member of the Black Panther Party and later became a revered professor at Rutgers and Bard. And actually, there's a larger collection of his works at the Beinecke known as the Wesley Brown Papers. It was directed by Rome Neal. Rome Neal is a musician, director, and performer, and he's still active in New York City today. And it was produced by Miguel Algarin, who, as we saw earlier, was one of the founding members of the Poets Cafe. Go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So what we actually have in the Beinecke are several materials. We have a script of the play, which you can see in the far left here, but also flyers, playbills, posters, and a press release as well. And having these materials not only provides important details to the play's production, but also significantly how the play engaged with its audience and the greater community. So if you're interested, I invite you to check out these materials in the Beinecke. And there are also actually clips of the 1992 production available on YouTube if you're interested as well. And with that, I'll pass it on to my colleague, Sebas.
Thank you so much, Zoe. And I'm Sebastián Andrés Grandas, and I'm a PhD student in the Comparative Literature Department at Yale. And today I'm going to talk about some materials in the Beinecke that come from Luis Valdés and El Teatro Campesino. Teatro Campesino has often been referred to as the birth of Chicano theater. Chicano is a term that refers to Mexican Americans. It was taken up in the 1960s to describe a Mexican American identity, but also an activist political stance. El Teatro Campesino was founded by Luis Valdez, who's pictured on the left. And actually, it's interesting, this picture only exists in the beinecke. You cannot find it on Google. But Luis Valdez is on the left, and he founded El Teatro Campesino as part of a farm workers community that was living and working in Delano, California. And the company was made up entirely of the farm workers who were working in the fields in Delano. In 1965, the activists Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta began organizing a strike. This was a strike that was going to fight for better working conditions, better pay, and better safety in the farm working fields for the Mexican American community. And Luis Valdez founded El Teatro Campesino in direct support of this strike. The idea of the company was to put on productions, they were called actos, that would encourage people and get people in the community to be invested in this strike, and to inform people as to the importance of community organizing and working together. You can see some of the pictures here, you can see that there's a person playing one of the bosses in a pig mask. There's a person playing a policeman, and there's also an image of the actual strike and one of the rallies for the strike. The company, El Teatro Campesino, was the epitome of a people's theater. And so the company would blur the line between the audience and the actor, and all of the actors working for the company were all untrained formally. They were farm workers who wanted to be a part and who wanted to be part of the art that was being made in support of the strike. So we can go to the next slide. Thank you so much. So at the beinecke, we have a number of materials related to El Teatro Campesino. On the left, you can see some photos of the different productions going on. So you can see there's a photo of one of the productions in one of the camps that people would work at. But then also there's a photo of one of the productions going on in the fields. They would even have some productions in truck beds. They were bringing the theater to the people. And then on the right, we can see some materials that were made by people in support of the strike. So if we can go to the next slide. Here's another look at some of the community materials. As you can see, the materials are very much made by hand, made by the community themselves. So you can get a sense of how ground up and how communal this company was and how communal the strike was. Eventually, Teatro Campesino would go on to have a very large influence across the country, opening doors for Latino playwrights and serving as an example of the art that could be made that was tied to a specific community and a specific activist stance. If we can change the slide. Thank you. Now I'm going to explain a later development. So the Teatro Campesino eventually grew. There were productions they made for television. And eventually in 1979, Valdez published Zoot Suit, which was considered to be the enormous breakthrough for Latino theater. Zoot Suit would be put on Broadway, which of course was considered a huge breakthrough in terms of the mainstream. And the play takes its name from the iconic zoot suits. You can see some of these pictures here of the person wearing the zoot suit. And these suits became popular with Mexican Americans in the 1940s as a symbol of Chicano identity and Pachuco style. Please, next slide. Thank you. And at the beinecke, so I'll actually keep explaining a little bit of the context. In 1943 in Los Angeles, in the middle of rising tensions and racial tensions with the entrance of the US into World War II, a number of US servicemen carried out attacks against Mexican Americans who were wearing the zoot suits. These were a series of racially charged incidents that became known as the Zoot Suit riots. And Valdez's play Zoot Suit is inspired by these riots as an exploration of not only the political violence, but also the mythical, what he called, and this is a quote, the mythical, quizzical, frightening being, the precursor of revolution known as the Mexican-American Pachuco. So that's where the whole idea of the zoot suit comes from. So at the beinecke, we have materials from a movie directed by Valdez that came out in 1981. So of course, this was another big indicator that Teatro Campesino had made it into the mainstream and that Latino theater was something that could be made into a full-fledged movie production. And at the beinecke, we have the official press booklets that were given to the press to promote the film. So in these booklets, there are movie posters, photos that were taken on the set. We can see some of those photos here, reviews of the film that would be distributed broadly. So it's a very interesting kind of set of materials that not only have to do with the Teatro Campesino, but its later evolution and Valdez's later career. So that's all I have, and thank you all very much, and I will pass it to my friend Luis.
Hi, everyone, again. My name is Luis, as I mentioned before. I'm a second-year student in the Spanish and Portuguese program here at Yale, and I'll talk about two poets that influenced greatly 20th century literature across the Atlantics, and they are Langston Hughes from the United States and Nicolas Guillen from Cuba. And you can see here in the slide, Nicolas Guillen is a person to the left, and Langston Hughes is to the right. And they have a picture together. All of these are pictures also that can be found, portraits at the beinecke collections. So these collections, they contain mostly through huge papers. They contain letters from and to Guillen, as well as notes that Hughes penned down as he was translating some of Guillen's poems. So in 1930, Hughes traveled to Havana, where he met Nicolas Guillen. They were nearly the same age, 26 and 27 at the time. And some months later, Guillen published Motivos de Son, a poetry collection that fused Afro-Cuban rhythms and vernacular language. Hughes probably recognized in this work a parallel to his own experiments with jazz and blues poetry. And by then, Hughes had gained recognition as a key figure in the Harlem Renaissance, and Guillen's own popularity would grow tremendously in the 1930s, both in Cuba and abroad after publishing Motivos de Son. In the letters preserved here at the beinecke, we can see that Guillen mailed Hughes some of his poems, asking for his opinion. Guillen tells him that his poems were being received with very well received in the island, and he even jokes that he might be elected as a House representative one day. Though their exchanges are warm and playful, they're full of jokes and compliments, they also underline more pragmatic interests and stakes in Guillen and Hughes' relationship. For instance, they show how Guillen and Hughes sent each other magazines in which their work sometimes appeared. They discuss honorariums for the publication of Guillen's translated poems. Over time, Guillen and Hughes will both benefit from their relationship, Hughes as a translator and Guillen as an up-and-coming poet. Hughes will later translate other important figures of Hispanic literatures, such as Gabriela Mistral and Federico Garcia Lorca, and papers about those exchanges are also present at beinecke, but Guillen's work was arguably his first major translation project. And if we can go to the next slide, thank you. In the letters, we can track the political dimensions of this relationship. For instance, Guillen appeals to Hughes to protest when he is denied a US visa, and later on, he tells him that they would have to meet on some other, quote, free place of the world. And again, when the CIA-backed invasion at Playa Girón, or the Bay of Pigs, takes place in 1961, Guillen sends a very solemn telegram to Hughes, which you can see on the screen, now signing as the president of the Cuban Union of Artists and Writers and urging Hughes and his friends to publicly oppose the attack. Through these letters, we see how literary admiration gave way to networks of solidarity and how friendship was also tested and redefined by Cold War politics. And last, Beinecke also holds Hughes' translation drafts with revisions and marginal comments. And for scholars of translation, these materials are invaluable. They let us see how Hughes negotiated tone, rhythm, and cultural reference, and how he sometimes reconsidered a word or a phrase to carry both the sound and the social meaning of Guillen's poetry. Taken together, this material shows how poetry, translation, and politics intersected across the Americas in the 20th century, and I invite you to think of Hughes and Guillen as an entry point into the broader intellectual histories that Beinecke can make available through its collections. And thank you very much, and without further ado, I leave the floor for my colleagues from the Nahuatl Working Group.
Pialino Chime, could you go to the next slide, please? Which Pialino Chime means hello, everyone. Nanotoka Alexa, Noxonquisca de la Fuente, Wanistoknikan, Wanyano Tequishpoyo, Ilianna, Itoka Ilianna. So my name is Alexa de la Fuente, and I'm here with my friend Ilianna Vázquez. And well, Tiknehki Tikpaneshtise, Huascasquia Amat, Sampampa, Nosquia. Tikneki, tikpaneshtise nahuatlatoliwan, nahuatlala mikayot, tlenamansin. Wan kenishki hueli, awotihueli, monespanoa, nochi tlanenehuelisli namansin. So basically what we want to do for today is, yes, look at colonial documents or documents from other siglos, other centuries, but also combine them and find the possibilities within combining them with current day discourses and knowledge production. And that is the basis of what our Nahuatl working group is about. We have founded this working group since last year, and we have gone through a range of activities since last year. So presenting movie screenings, having Beinecke sessions, as you can see from this image right here. We have been having a close relationship with the wonderful Julia and presenting different Nahuatl documents already. So this is a wonderful opportunity to present more of them to a broader range of people that may be interested in learning more about Nahuatl as an indigenous language, but also Nahuatl in the current day. And later on in the presentation, we'll talk a little bit about our current year initiatives and events. But for now, let me pass it off to Ilianna.
Tlaskamati Alexa, Pialino Chime, Nanotoka Ilianna, Nanimo Machtia, Tlapawalisli, Nika, Wanamana Nisanilo, Sika, Kense, Amoshitle, Nonka, Pan, Beinecke, Moshkali. Hello, everyone. My name is Ilianna. I'm a PhD student in the Spanish and Portuguese department, and I'm going to be presenting a few of the Nahuatl works that we have at the Beinecke. I want to begin by saying that, unfortunately, as we have been working on this for a little while, the collection of Nahuatl documents at the Beinecke is not necessarily the biggest, and that can pose like some challenges, but regardless, we do have some documents. And I do want to say that that even though we do not have a lot of documents in Nahuatl, that doesn't necessarily show or kind of like correlate to the production that indigenous people were making, because there was a big production during the colonial time, and there's still a big production of Nahuatl text at the moment. But anyway, so let's talk about some of the documents that we do have here. And the first one that we have here is a sermon, and this one is written completely in Nahuatl. We do not have the exact date for this document, but it was written between the 1500s and the 1600s, so it's kind of like a big range of time. And something that is very interesting about this document is not only that it's in Nahuatl, but it's also a monolingual document, because most of the time when we tend to see sermons, we see them in two columns. So we see one column in Spanish and then one column in Nahuatl, and they were used by the friars to preach. And that way they will know what they will be saying, and then they will have the translation. And also a lot of them then tended to be more like printed text, and this one is a manuscript. So that is something that is very interesting about this. It's something that it was handwritten. It wasn't necessarily something that was mass produced like the other ones that we tend to see. And also it's monolingual. So we know that the person that was kind of like reading this didn't necessarily need the Spanish translation for the text, because they knew what they were using them for. This structure was also used by other texts like the confessionaries and everything. And these texts were produced by the friar for them in order to be read to the indigenous people, so that they will be reading out loud to the indigenous people in their language, in Nahuatl. And that way they will also help with this project of spreading Christian religion. And next. Another very exciting document that we have here at the beinecke is actually a facsimile of the Codex Mendoza. The original is actually in Oxford, but it is very exciting to see this document. This codex was actually commissioned by Antonio de Mendoza, who was the first viceroy of Spain. So it was kind of like something very early on. And it was commissioned about like 10 years after the conquest. In the initial part of the conquest, there was a lot of destruction of the manuscripts and everything. And at this time, there was a need to recover not only the history, but in this case for Mendoza, also he wanted to trace how to collect the texts, because they needed to know how the Mexica Empire had been working, because they didn't necessarily have the power to create a new system. They needed to know the old system in order to kind of like use it. And then also that way they will be able to collect tribute. So this was kind of like one of the intentions behind this manuscript. And then also it relates the story of the Mexica as well. This is the first page of the codex, and it is very interesting because this image that we see here is actually a map, and it was kind of like it shows us the conception of the Mexica people regarding space. So it was kind of like the city of Tenochtitlan, and it was showing us the four calpuli in which the city was divided, and so kind of like the four big segments, and this is how they were conceiving space. So it is very interesting to see this. This document was commissioned by, as I said, by Antonio Mendoza, the viceroy, and he asked indigenous artists to create this document, but it's actually a more like a bilingual document, because we do see all of this now symbolism and everything, but we also see words in Spanish. So in that way, the Spaniards will also be able to engage with this text and know what all of these cliffs were standing for. And then the next one. And yeah, so this is pretty much what the codex looks like. So we see a combination of images, which is how the Nahua used to elaborate their text, but we also see the presence of words and explaining the different things, like the history or how they were collecting taxes. This textbook is organized in 3 parts. So the first one is thinking about the history of the Mexica and their conquest. The second one is more thinking about all the provinces that they had conquered. Like I said, this was very important for the Spaniards because they needed to replicate that model. So they needed to know what territories had been conquered by the Mexica in order to kind of like keep that control, and also keep on using those extractive methods that the Aztec had been using. And then the last one also, there was an interest in the daily life. So thinking about all of these traditions and everything, and all of them are depicted in this pictographic manner, but also with some labels in Spanish. And like I said, this is not the original. We have a facsimile, but these are actually very important texts as well, because, well, the digital era is still something that is somewhat recent. So this kind of text allowed for a long time scholars to engage with these texts when they weren't able to go to these institutions like Oxford. And even now, when we have digital copies, and then we have all this technology that allows us to look at these documents and make them big and everything, we still have these are still very useful, because we can go to the archives and look at them, and it's a different experience to be able to touch these texts and see how they were put together and all of this experience. And next, and then this is the last one. This is a very interesting collection of documents. It is under the Puebla documents, and the Puebla documents is a big collection of documents from this region, so Central Mexico, in the city of Puebla. And it's many different documents from like criminal cases and different things that are happening. In this one also has some documents in Nahuatl. There's another collection of documents from Hidalgo who also have some documents in Nahuatl. There's a third big collection from Mexico, but sadly I don't think that the collection from Mexico has a lot of documents in Nahuatl, but this one does, and this one is very interesting. It's a very long document. I think when I was looking at the catalog, it said that it had 183 pages, so a very long document. And it's kind of like describing all of this process in which this baño, so I'm imagining that it's probably like a temazcal, which is very important within indigenous communities and everything, and how it had once belonged to the indigenous elite and how it was being transferred to other people. And this the image that we see here is part of the documents, and this kind of like a map that was kind of like created to go with the case. And now I will pass it back to Alexa.
Piali, Zampa, Nochimpe, Nochipa, creo que vamos a tener muchas preguntas aquí, pero we have a lot of questions already coming in. Zampampa, Namansin, Nikneki, Nikpaneshtis, Se Amatle, Namansin, So Namansin, Nechkatsin, Pampa, Monanik Tlalia, Moneki, So Ipati, Timo tlatlanilice, kenihki tijueli tikitase, tlanenehuelisli tlalamihkayot, wan nahuatlatoli, pan, seyok amat, miak amat. So basically what I am referring to is that we're going to kind of go more into kind of current day centuries here in this slide. And I want to proposition that we should be asking ourselves how we can see Nahuatl knowledge production, words, and ideologies and cosmovisions within other sets of papers that can't be readily or as easily categorized as Nahuatl documents. And so here I want to start off with the right side. This is actually coming from the collection of Benjamin Worf. And here we have a Manual de la Lengua Nahuatl. Actually, I believe that Professor Adam Kuhn has written or is about to write a little bit more about this specific manual as it relates to Nahuatl education in Mexico during the 1960s. And Ilianna, you can correct me because we were both at that presentation with Professor Adam Kuhn over the summer. But this one is actually such a rare find, and I was so happy to actually be seeing it or viewing it with Julia just a couple of weeks ago, because within the manual, you actually see a personal letter written by the author Mariano Rojas to Benjamin Worf, because Benjamin Worf is a big time deal in linguistics, but I also imagine other fields as they intersect in those matters. And actually what I had noticed when I was like viewing it briefly, and I will come back and I will be inviting some of my friends that are also interested, that a lot of the actual grammar structures and the alphabetic use, while it varies between regions in Mexico, and also I would imagine in El Salvador they also have their Nahuatl variants, so it would be different in the written script. It is actually very similar to the Nahuatl that Ilianna and I have been learning from for a few years now through EDS, which is the Veracruz variant. So this one is actually just located within this vast array of Benjamin Worf papers, and it would take some time to like, yes, okay, I want to view the Worf papers, but you can actually see Nahuatl being presented in these really amazing and rare finds too. So encouraging kind of a viewing of that collection. But on the left side is more of those kind of expansive notions of where can we see Nahuatl knowledge production actually emerging from. And this is coming from the Mecha archives, actually, a few of the murals in El Barrio collection. And also, I couldn't put it in this site in particular, but I would recommend people also viewing the Yale Chicana papers from this collection of Mecha, because it provides a lot of the symbolism and a lot of the figurations of the quote unquote Aztecs that emerged within the Chicano movement in the 1960s. And we see that in prevalence, like right now, that is 1976. And thinking about the imagery of Guadalupe, but also other Aztec goddesses as part of this movement towards the quote unquote Mexican patria. So thinking of cultural nationalism tied in with current day discussions of Nahuatl cosmovisions. How are they in conversation with each other? How are they in tension with each other? I want to preposition in our October 4th event, we'll hopefully have a few of those documents in our table for y'all to come over and we can have those discussions and provide a little bit of context of how we may be viewing it from this ideology coming from Mexico, but also how it is operating within diasporic communities in the US. Especially because diasporic communities or Latinx diasporic communities don't look a certain way, they're not homogenized. They also include indigenous identities as well. And a final note on this one is also thinking a little bit about the different stories that come alongside the figurations. Ilianna and I were just having a little conversation about the different ways in which people arrange certain figures of like Aztec gods and goddesses. So I'm thinking a lot about it from my own personal research. I forgot to say I'm a PhD student in American Studies and I study particularly media, is also how this has had a long-standing root also in a lot of 80s and 90s movies about Chicanos. So thinking about particularly, unfortunately, this tends to be a lot of gang-related films, but that they still use a lot of like Aztec symbolisms to talk about their own identities. And largely it is in LA. So something to ruminate over as well. And next slide so that I can present a little bit about the current events. So we will be presenting, we will be having a little table with documents that we have been showing today in October 4th. So like the initial slide that Julia was showing, one of the initial slides, but we will also be having a lot of community craft circles this semester in order to foster a better sense of community within Yale, but also beyond Yale. So we encourage everybody to show up in any of the dates, times, or locations that we have presented here. You can also follow us at the Yale Nahuatl Working Group on Instagram. We will be posting updates. We will have supplies, food, drinks, and hopefully a good time and a good discussion. This week in particular, we will be showing a few Nahuatl short documentaries and also animations. Hope to see y'all there. And Ilianna, I don't know if you want to say something else about these events.
I also wanted to say that we're going to be having another event in collaboration with the beinecke on October 3rd at noon. We're going to be looking at some of these documents. So if you're interested in seeing some of this and then some additional ones as well, please come and join us. We're also going to have one of my friends and colleagues, Chase, that is going to be coming, and he's an expert on the confesionario. So if you're interested in that, please join us.